pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We'll begin the meeting with a moment of silence. And if you would please keep in your thoughts and prayers Jean Curran Traverse, the mother of Bob Curran, our building inspector, who passed away. Services for her will be tomorrow from 10 to 12 at the Magoon Biggins Funeral Home in Rockland. Meeting is being recorded and televised by the local cable company. And now I get to turn the gavel, I won't pass it, the gavel over to Frank for the reorganization of the board.
This being a meeting of the full board following the election, it is now time to reorganize. I would like to open the floor up to nominations for chair.
I nominate Kyle Klosky as chairman.
Second.
Okay. Dr. Kowalski is nominated as chair. Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor of appointing Dr. Kowalski chairman?
Aye.
It's unanimous. Mr. Chairman, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Frank. The next item of business would be to accept nominations for vice chair.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to nominate Mr. Savucci for vice chair.
Is there a second?
Second it.
Second. Any other nominations? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
And clerk, nominations for clerk.
I'll go with, I'd like to nominate Brian Mazanson as acting clerk.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Any further nominations? All those in favor?
Aye.
Now that you're rehabilitated and in good health,
Yeah, both the cane.
you can clerk once more, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
You think you can handle those duties?
I know I'm gonna have to buy a new pen.
Approval of bill and payroll warrants. Is there a motion to
So
accept?
moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Acceptance of correspondence in the read file.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Public forum. Now is the time for anyone to speak who would like to say something that's about an item that's not on the agenda. Yes. Name and address?
Sean Kane, I'm at 31 Forest Street. Question about, I don't quite understand, but there might be a subcommittee that was formed for some of the initiatives going on this year pertaining to the budget. Is that correct or not?
That's what we'll be talking
Frank.
about tonight.
It is on the, I saw that there's something with getting some feedback and survey, but I didn't know if
Right.
there was specifically that was on the
Right.
agenda.
At the last, I wasn't able to attend the last meeting, but the last meeting, Scott had actually brought up some points in between meetings about having a different process for budget review as far as the selectmen are concerned. I don't want to paraphrase you, but
I was at the last meeting.
But I'm going to paraphrase you. Well, Scott was taking charge there at that meeting about that, and one of my things I wanted to do today was to thank Scott for doing so.
It was excellent.
He was the energy behind it. We're going to be bringing people in, department heads, some department heads into the meetings over the next series of months, and ask them to think about different scenarios for next year's budget. It doesn't replace what the Finance Committee does. It's the selectmen getting some different information, and that's what Scott was talking. If you were here last week, then you're up to date.
Yeah, I thought that was
You're as up to
excellent.
date as I am, anyway.
I didn't know if there was, in addition to that, he did make reference to a committee that was being formed. Is there also a committee that's being formed?
Well, I think
or-
there was a discussion of a committee in the past, and I think that we seriously have to consider that we do need some members of our committee, or at least a member of this committee, and a member of the finance committee, and obviously the administration, and
Okay.
other participants to sort of come up with some guidelines for us and things we can work on. We haven't gone to the next step of forming that committee, but I think we have to do it sooner than later, so.
Do you have a rough schedule for throughout the year, like the different milestones that you'd like to hit as far as over the next couple months, we're looking to get feedback? After that, maybe we're looking to,
Something we have to discuss.
Yeah, I think, unfortunately, July and August are upon us. But I personally would like to see the decision of who's going to be on that committee made and when they're going to meet and what their charge is, by the end of July.
sure.
And certainly have a good plan.
One concern I do have about who's on the committee, and I haven't been involved in anything like this before, but it seems to me that one of the critical questions, at least that needs to be discussed by, I think, the school department, but also probably other departments, is the critical difference between layoffs and wage reductions. I bring that up because if you look at the student-teacher ratio right now, Whitman Hanson is 15 from the bottom, which means if we went through another round of significant layoffs, that would hit the teacher-student ratio pretty hard. Whereas if there was a wage reduction, obviously there would be a decrease in salary, but the student-teacher ratio would stay similar, or some variation, so.
It sounds like you're kind of getting into the nature of what people would be discussing
Yes, but also.
over the
if-
course of the next year and in that committee.
I guess what I'm getting at is, if the people who are on the committee are primarily employees of the town, there's somewhat of a conflict there. Whereas if they're selectmen, obviously,
So you're urging us to consider having people from,
or at least
Just-
consider that when
yeah.
you're choosing who's on the committee.
that
Citizen
would
at large?
have been my preference anyway. Now, there have been attempts over the last number of years to have a committee of school committee members and other people to talk about our budget crises over the last couple of years, and that hasn't borne any fruit, really, has it?
No, it is failed.
So we're looking at a different approach.
Yeah. I mean, this year in particular, for obvious reasons, is,
And the first step, we'll hear the beginnings of it in a few minutes when we talk to Dr. Tarsi from Bridgewater State.
excellent.
And we can go from there.
Thank you.
Okay, Sean. Under new business, public meeting with respect to the application of Nantucket Wild, Andrew Poche? Yes. Poche? For a transient vendor license to sell fish on the premises located at 1113 Bedford Street, subject to final inspection and approval of the Board of Health, Building Commissioner, and Fire Department, and proof of liability insurance as required.
It's something that's been, I guess it's the guy that's been there for years.
This is
The business that's been operating at
Right.
Shoetown Tavern.
Right. Same business.
I bought the trailer from Bernie.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah,
That's
and
why I don't see the trailer anymore when I leave my
Yeah,
house.
and I've had another business that I was wrapping up, and
Okay.
it's time to get back to
Okay.
the people that are looking for the fish.
Yeah, looking for lobster. Someone-
I commercial fish. Bernie was a commercial lobsterman.
Okay.
And this is going to be a full-time venture for myself, where Bernie was just Fridays and Saturdays. I'm looking initially in the plan, I put Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday in Whitman. I also, I was a former businessman. I grew up in Norwood, live in East Bridgewater the last 24 years. And in 2005, I started commercial fishing, so this was a perfect dovetail to what I was doing. I bought a smokehouse in Chatham in 2010, and my ideal scenario would be dovetailing that with the business at a later time, But initially, I just want to do what Bernie was doing.
Okay. Great. Is there a motion to accept?
moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Frank, do you know if any of these conditions have been met yet, or are we still waiting for any?
I've been to the Board of Health, got approved for,
No, the Board of Health is
Still waiting.
to hear from you.
yeah,
You do need to see
I
the
need to
Board
be
of Health.
inspected, the Bernie's trailer needs to be inspected, I need to provide them with a serve-safe permit, which I will, and a license to sell fish, which I will get from Causeway Street. It's just an application and a fee.
Okay, pending all of that stuff taken care of. Does anyone have any questions or concerns, encouragement?
Yeah, I mean,
I'll do a good job for you.
without a doubt, I mean, it's been, the guy that was there before was doing a great job.
Yep.
Very busy, so
This is going to be more.
it's gonna be more, which is.
More variety,
This is the bill.
more opportunity.
Yeah.
All those in favor?
Ultimately, I'm looking for brick and mortar in town.
Great, great.
Plenty of that.
Would you
Yep.
be? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, there's a few things in the
There are a
works.
few empty places. There are a few empty places.
Yeah,
where you
there's-
could
there's,
slide right in.
I put a picture in there, the parking lot next to, between Mutual Bank and Signature Healthcare is owned by, it's got the bricks in front of it. I spoke to Bob Curran about it, and it's owned by the bank. It was originally leased by Signature, and then they bought the house next door and made that the parking lot.
Right.
So they don't want any liability for people parking there. And so it's really a dead spot in town that would be a perfect site where I would want to hardwire the trailer
Right.
and not have generators and noise and such. I put that in the plan as well.
Okay, great.
You know, I'm looking forward to being here.
Anything else? All those in favor?
Aye.
Lots of luck.
Thank you so
luck.
much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Now, under old business, we have, we're graced with the presence of Dr. Melinda Tarsi from Bridgewater State. We spent a little time talking before the meeting, but just to put this in context, and it's a good thing that Sean is here, because Sean has had a burr under his saddle for a couple of years now about the need for our town to do more long-range planning than it has done, especially around the budget. We've discussed before, budget cycles go from year to year. We need to take not only the short-term look, but we need to take a long-term look too. I did some work in planning in my job that I used to have at Massasoit Community College. And there it was it was simple to set up a strategic planning effort because the stakeholders are right there. You have people that you don't have to really ask to participate on committees. They're there to do that. They have to do that. And so we had a process that ran kind of like clockwork for a lot of years. I was stymied myself and thinking about what does one do with the community? How do you get started? Because it was clear to me with doing the process at the college that the first thing that you really need, the thing that the goals and objectives that are eventually going to be drawn up, that are eventually going to be hopefully measured, the first thing that you need is some sort of a statement of values upon which those goals and objectives are based. What are the values? When you're talking about a college, the statement of values can be kind of simple. When you're talking about a town, there's a lot of information that we don't currently have a firm grasp of, but that needs to be gathered, I think, while we're worrying about next year's budget, as Sean has just been talking about, and also while we're looking at the town's capital needs and human needs down the road. And frankly, I was kind of frustrated with how to get this started. The school department used to do it. They used to have meetings of all of their people and some citizens. I was on the school committee a while ago, and I can remember going to meetings in which we had planning processes developed. But still, a town to me was a larger idea, and I couldn't get into it. One night I was talking to my wife, what I mentioned to you was the director of High Point in Brockton, and she reminded me that on my cell phone I had recently received a survey that her opioid coalition is running about health needs in the South Shore. Frank has shared that with you. And she says, why don't you just do a survey? And I said, I don't want to touch Facebook for that. I'm sorry. Because that engenders a lot of response, but sometimes not the most useful response. And she says, well, you could talk to the women that work for me about it. I decided not to do that. I talked to Frank, and Frank had known of you. And so he contacted you, and that's why we invited you here. You have a feeling for what we need. We've all, I think, seen the email that you sent to Frank about methodology. I'm really encouraged about the whole thing, but enough of my blather. I'd like to give you a chance to talk.
Oh, no, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about the potential to help Whitman. This blends together what I do for my profession, which is as a faculty member at Bridgewater State University in the Political Science Department and the MPA program. I teach survey methodology and public opinion research, and I'm also, as of last week now, the chair of the Finance Committee in the town of Halifax, where I've served through 2 budget cycles. So I'm really excited about being able to bring these two kind of sides of what I do together, and I recently wrapped up a similar project for the town of Millbury, conducting their master plan survey. With a similar methodology, although on a much shorter time frame, we achieved a response rate of close to 20%. And again, the time frame was quite short, but I was encouraged by the use of both a paper survey and an online survey to maximize the response rate and to give more people the chance to make their voice heard than might be able to come to town meeting, for example. In terms of talking with some of you about the process, I know you've read a little bit about the methodology, and just to sort of publicly state, I would recommend what we call mixed modes, or using both a paper survey and an online survey. We can utilize the survey platform Qualtrics that I have a license for at Bridgewater State University, which is one of the premier survey platforms. And we can also embed a QR code, those funny looking little barcodes, on a paper survey to allow folks who may get it in the mail to quickly snap on their mobile device and instantly take the survey from a tablet or a phone if they don't feel like actually logging onto the computer. The point is to make it as accessible as possible to as many people as possible to improve response rates. For that reason, I also outlined some things to think about in terms of keeping the survey accessible to a wide range of folks, making sure that we are really careful about the way that we word questions and the way we order them, and that's what I would love to help you with, is ensuring that we're going to get the best data possible. As I tell my students, I think that bad data is worse than no data at all, and I want to make sure that we're crafting questions and even ordering questions in a way that ensures that we get reliable information on what your residents prioritize when it comes to the budget, to development, and to any other issues that you'd like to garner public opinion on. So I'm happy to answer any questions about either my qualifications, my approach to survey research, or to start, as I know we'll continue this conversation hopefully in the future, but any other ideas about the kinds of things you'd love to know about the community.
Yeah, we had received, we shared the High Point survey, and also the one from a town in Shrewsbury. We received a copy of their questions, which I thought was pretty good. One of the things I kind of noticed, though, in it, and you just made me think of it, is that in the way the different categories for questions were set up, police services and public safety always was at the bottom of the list. Is that what you're talking about? That's not necessarily the right thing to do, is it?
Right. I mean, something as simple as the order in which you list responses, or
Right.
having one question appear before another question, might seem inconsequential, but actually from a political psychology point of view, it can have major implications for how someone views a question. So methodologically speaking, those are the sort of things that I'd be very much attuned to. One thing I wanted to mention is having a paper survey obviously means that someone has to code that. I'm running an upper-level public opinion class for my undergraduates this semester, and we do what we call service learning work at Bridgewater State, where our students participate in activities in the classroom that give back to the community. So I would be more than willing to use coding the surveys as a service learning project for my public opinion class. They'll not only be able to help vet the survey and think about different issues. It's always great to get more eyes on it rather than fewer, but then it also will have at least 15 extra coders, and it would be a great experience for them to see a real-life survey process from start to finish.
Okay. What do you see as the first steps after our introduction to you this evening? I imagine some of us would be seeing you and would be going over possible who the stakeholders might be.
I think that'd be great to get a sense of who the stakeholders are, and then to be able to sit down as to the extent that we can, and to start thinking about at a really high level the sorts of questions you want to ask without worrying about how we're going to ask them just yet. We want to think about the kinds of issues we want to ask about, and then from there we can start actually designing questions, thinking about ordering response options. And one of the biggest things that I am an advocate of is beta testing the survey as much as possible. Like I said, getting a lot of eyes on it and making sure that we don't just sort of pass something around in our little bubble and think it makes a lot of sense to us without, making sure that it makes sense to other people too.
For example, to the point that Sean brought up at the beginning of the meeting about the input of people who have interest in the schools. I've always felt that Whitman was supportive of a school department. It's sometimes been said that the elderly in town don't care about the schools, but I've never found that to be the case. I've always found them to be supportive. On the other hand, if you were to take a look at the 356 towns in the cities and towns in the Commonwealth, the Whitman-Hanson School District is in the bottom 10 as far as its support, the way the state measures that support. So it's important, obviously, to get input from the right people so that we know what kind of schools our town really wants to have. That would not only be people who work in the schools, it would also be, I'd love to get make sure that we get parent input, strong numbers of parents.
And I think that's a perfect example of where advertising across different platforms and having different actors from the town advertise the survey, encouraging people to fill it out, is truly helpful, so that it's not just seen as an academic running a survey, but that rather, if whatever you care about, schools, water, anything, having that department encouraging, or that committee encouraging you to take the survey, means a lot to increasing response rates.
Would you suggest that the distribution of the survey be multifaceted through departments, through council on aging, through library, through the schools perhaps?
I think the easiest thing in terms of the paper survey is to do a direct mailer to homes. I'm still waiting on my personal research budget until the state numbers shake out, but that is likely something that I can cover, or at least help cover. I would encourage all the departments to advertise on any of their social media or any other electronic platforms the survey link. We can also talk about sending out a reminder postcard. Researchers have found that people getting a reminder to take a survey actually increases response rates, because we legitimately do forget to do those kinds of things. And those are all things we can talk about in terms of the time frame that you're looking to get the finalized report, like the one I wrote for Millbury, which I'm happy to send along. Sort of reverse engineer backwards and think about how much time we have based on when you want to get things in your hands. Because I understand you are in a position, being on a finance committee myself, that we're always looking for data to make good decisions.
Right. Okay. I had mentioned to you before the meeting too that even though High Point has done a survey of southeastern Massachusetts as far as the substance abuse is concerned, it might not be bad to have at least some questions in our questionnaire that deal with that also. When we were talking about the health needs of the community, we are an aging community, and I suggested that you look at the Board of Selectmen when I say that, and maybe even the people in the audience. But sorry, Sean, gray before your years. I forgot where I was going with that. Yeah.
You were old.
What? Where was I? Where was I? Yeah.
I'm just ordering you some pudding.
All right, I'll take a break. Never mind.
Oh, I figured about getting other issues on, so like the healthcare issues,
Right.
and I think, as I've mentioned to a couple of you, I think that with a survey rollout this big, one of the things we talk about a lot is exercising our sample, or how many times we survey folks. I think that this is going to be a great initiative to get a lot of information in one shot, basically. Because the more that we run surveys, we find sort of diminishing returns over time. People get tired of taking them. We all have done the same thing and have gotten tired of taking surveys. So I think making sure that this one is one that collects all the information that we want while still remaining doable and accessible to people, I think is important.
Right. Anyone else?
I have a
Let me shut up.
couple of questions and suggestions. I think when we're looking for grades of importance on different departments, and I understand where Kyle was going, where you may, like, in one of the appendix B here, it has fire services at the top, police services at the bottom. Maybe if we put them alphabetically, all the lists alphabetically, it doesn't show one department more, fruitful than another. Right? It might be a way of saying, well, they can put in the first couple of pages stating that the list of departments are in alphabetical order, does not show its importance. That way, everyone gets a fair shake.
Absolutely.
And basically, what I'm trying to get
Unless
at-
you're the zoning board.
Huh?
Unless you're the zoning board.
Well, that's the way it is, brother. You Z, unless it's board of, anyway, and, it's where the taxpayers want to spend their tax dollars and the importance of it. I think it'll be a great help because, we're looking to see exactly where the taxpayers want their dollars to go and their money. So I think it's a great idea.
I agree, and I think those sorts of things that seem little to us, right? What order we put things in, as I think you've all correctly pointed out, can have implications. We can even use the online survey. I can automatically randomize the list, and then you could see if those who are presented with a randomized list behave differently in their preferences than those who received an alphabetic list. That might be a little too methodologically geeky, but it would be a good way to test the effects of the survey design, which is always good. We want to make sure that we're collecting reliable data.
Anyone else have any questions?
How long did the Shrewsbury study run?
I just saw this one tonight. I wasn't involved in the Shrewsbury study.
You had one, you said, was it
Millbury?
Millbury, and you got a roughly 20% return. How long
Correct.
did that run?
It was in the field for about 2 weeks, which is quite short.
How do you see this kicking off?
I think that if I'm happy to work on survey design over the summer. I obviously won't have my students to do coding work until September, but that's fine if we hold off on paper coding until then. And then we could have sort of both the online surveys and the paper ones coded by, I would guess, October. As long as we were sure that we had gone through, one of the things I mentioned in the methodology was because I'm an academic researcher, I do have to go through Institutional Review Board or IRB approval to make sure that I am not unethically harming participants, which just means that my institution has to look at the questionnaire and make sure that I'm not doing anything unethical in my research. We have to give them about 2 weeks of lead time just to review it and to ensure that I'm behaving as I should as an academic researcher. But I'm pretty flexible on time frame. The only thing I know I won't have until September are my students. But as I mentioned, if you have a specific date, I'd love to work with you to reverse engineer backwards and then set those goals and those timelines. As I mentioned with Millbury, we run a bit of a time crunch because of a public forum coming up, but all were in agreement that it was we wish we had a little more time with it.
Okay.
I do have a question. You said that Millbury was participation of about 20%. Is that not typical of a normal survey, or what are the percentages of a normal?
It's quite good for a survey that is for municipal government and for which there were no incentives offered. We all know that we're more likely to take a survey if we think we might get something. We might be in a raffle or something like that. That's something we could talk about methodologically. If we feel comfortable offering folks a chance to win gift cards or anything like that. It doesn't pollute the survey responses. It just means people are more likely to actually take the survey. And at the end of the day, increasing response rates are the kind of the focus, at least, of what we want while the survey's in the field. But 20% for a really short time frame, mixed modes in a small town was actually quite good.
Good, thank you.
How many people in Millbury? What's the
There are
population?
5,100. 5,100.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Yeah. It's even smaller than Halifax.
Well, yeah. Anyone else?
Well, I guess my only other question, so how do you see this kicking off, I guess, is do you anticipate having a meeting prior to, sometime in August or as soon as possible with how many people would you want to see there? 10, 15, or does it get to a point where it's not productive?
That's a good question. So I think at the earliest meeting where we're thinking about the issues we want, the more voices in the room, the better. And I'm around all summer and doing research, so I'm happy to meet around everyone else's schedules. So I can meet as early as you all want to. Once we get to the point of actually putting questions on paper, refining the language, then it would be helpful to have a few key people that I can constantly be interacting with and sending drafts back and forth to. Then bring the at least penultimate version back to the full group of stakeholders for everyone to take a look and to, as I said, beta test it. But I'm really flexible on time frame, and I'm ready to get started whenever you all are.
And you would facilitate that meeting, or?
Yes, I actually, I was an associate director of a polling center in graduate school, so I was used to dealing with a bunch of professors in a room trying to design a survey, so this will be far more pleasant.
Okay, our job then would be to establish a group of what we consider to be stakeholders that you can meet with. So that would be our task before we set up a meeting. Figure out which groups we want to touch and to how deeply we want to go into those groups.
And how to keep
Does that make sense?
Productive level, productive number of people.
Yeah. Without cutting what.
We don't want to cut anybody out, but
Yeah. We
we don't want to.
the idea is to get a broad-based view. However, we don't want to trying to talk 100 people into having a broad-based view. Okay, so that'll be our, pardon me?
Would be a long meeting.
Yeah. So our first task, I think, would be to find the right number of people and the right people to talk to Dr. Tarsi.
And I'm
have
happy
the
to be
initial
flexible about that. Once we get into survey design, as I said, as long as we give 2 weeks for my IRB to approve the final instrument, that's the only time frame that's in the back of my mind that I have to be respectful of. But other than that, I'm happy to move at the time frame that works for all of you.
Okay, great. Anyone else?
Sounds good.
Doctor, it's great to meet you, and I'm really excited about what could happen.
I'm really looking forward to this. I think it's going to be a great opportunity for my students as well as all the residents in the town to provide their feedback. So I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Minutes. Vote the minutes.
Sure.
Before we do that, continuing on this conversation, can I suggest that the board in particular, and perhaps reach out to Whitman Hanson and actually to the other schools, because they also have, in South Shore, deals with some of our kids.
Oh, okay. When you say other schools, that's what you're talking
Right.
about? Okay.
To reach out and perhaps ask for suggestions from the board as to people or positions we might want to include in this survey development team. Certainly, I'd like to see some of the departments represented, but more importantly, we need to reach out to the public, because we can easily collect the information internally. It's getting the public involved that is.
I think in order to do this, though, I mean, obviously to expedite this, we can't do this every 2 weeks. So I
No.
think someone from this board actually has to work with Frank and reach out to the doctor and represent this board
Right.
for it. So
Well, that's what I'm
otherwise,
thinking.
I mean, if we're waiting for every 2 weeks to get together and run with
Right.
this,
Right.
we're not going to get it done.
Not time for,
Not in time for anything.
right, yeah.
Would someone like to volunteer to work with Frank and myself at separate meetings to get the group together, to get the idea of
And
which
and
group?
if you're willing to do it over telephone or conference call, I'd be happy to
Sure.
jump in and
It's not a
and work.
public meeting for them, so. You know,
I can't always
right.
be here to meet, but if it works that way, I have no problem
That'd be great.
stepping in.
Okay, so Scott and I will work with Frank to come up with the next step, which is to come up with a group of people that could benefit from hearing Dr. Tarsi lead a meeting.
Yeah,
Right.
and
And we'll report back at our next meeting. We'll give ourselves that
after our
deadline.
deadline.
Okay.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. And I'm restricting it to just Scott, because otherwise we'd have to post the meeting.
Right.
Well, I would certainly still want to see feedback if selectmen,
Well, Yeah,
have information.
Talk to us.
Send into the office.
right.
The more information we get up front, and the better we'll be able to plan it.
Okay, good. Approval of, I missed approval of meeting minutes, the open session of June 12th.
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor?
Thank you.
Abstain.
I'll abstain. Okay, act on the, or new business continued. Act on the request of William Sharnock to be reappointed to the position of constable for a 3-year term, effective June 30th, 2018 through June 30th, 2021.
So moved.
Second.
I'm pleased to tell you we received completed applications and had the assistance of the police department in reviewing them,
And
and they are recommended by the chief.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
And same with the next person?
Yes.
Act on the request of Joel Thomas to be reappointed to the position of constable for a 3-year term, effective June 27th, 2018 through June 27th, 2021, subject to the receipt of an updated public officials bond.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Act on the request of the treasurer collector for a line item transfer in the amount of $10,000 from line item number 256, medical and life insurance, town match, to line item 257, Medicare tax, town match. Frank?
Each year, we're required to pay Medicare match on all payroll. That will include details, overtime, any money run through the payroll system. So it's difficult to predict how much we need. Treasurer is concerned that we have sufficient funds to meet the total numbers for the last quarter as requested. The transfer, the money is currently in the insurance town match line. Moving it to Medicare town match has no real impact on the end result of the budget process. Whatever's left flows to general fund. So I'm requesting that be approved.
Okay, is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Act on the request of the Board of Health for a line item transfer in the amount of $420 from line item number 206, Assistant Health Inspector, to line item 205, Animal Inspector.
This request is the result of an increase in quarantines.
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Act on the request of Chief Benton for a line item transfer in the amount of $5,628.
I believe the chief is requesting that be transferred from all other services. And that's to pay for a purchase on a bill that came in very late.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Act on the request of DPW Superintendent Bruce Martin for a line item transfer in the amount of $870 from line item 186, Union Labor Salaries, to line item 190, Division Expense.
This is the cost of 2 additional health club memberships that were not submitted earlier
Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
under the contract.
Any discussion?
These, union members,
Yes.
and they just joined the,
No, they just submitted it.
That's for the annual reimbursement.
It's an annual reimbursement. They
is there a
just received
timeline
it
on that?
June 30th.
Okay.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Response to right of first refusal for Franklin Village.
This is deja vu. We had a unit a couple of months ago, and this time around, they notified us a little earlier. This is a affordable condominium in the Franklin Village condo. I am assuming the board has no interest in pursuing its purchase.
Who's the monitoring agent for it?
It's a company in Boston. Somehow they got connected to this. It's in here. Chapa.
Kappa?
Yeah. And they're no fireball, that's for sure. So we need to notify them whether or not we wish to assert our right to purchase it.
I don't recommend it.
So do we need a,
We need a vote to either
Oh, that piece of property?
to notify them that we don't wish.
Okay, would someone like to make a motion that,
I'll make the motion. We do not wish to purchase the affordable.
I like those negative motions, yeah. Okay, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Vote to authorize the town administrator to enter into an agreement with Melanson Heath for audit services.
Yes, Melanson Heath has been conducting our audits, and I'm asking the board to vote to continue for the upcoming fiscal year.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Act on the request of the Southeastern Philharmonic Orchestra for permission to use the Town Hall Auditorium to conduct a free concert on Sunday, April 28th, 2019.
So moved.
Well, we're ahead of time.
Yeah.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Authorize the town administrator to sign the deed to 1030 Temple Street, Frank?
Last Thursday, we auctioned a property at 1030 Temple Street that had been taken in foreclosure. I had really high concerns about how marketable this property would be, particularly with a release tracking number assigned to it. Against all odds, the high bid was $170,000.
That's not bad.
Plus the 30 it would cost them to clean up the lot. I think we did very well. We had, typically, the treasurer can transfer a deed in foreclosure, but the tax title attorney who handles title work for Mary Beth felt strongly that she doesn't have that authority. So I'm asking the board to authorize me to execute the deed on behalf of the town.
Okay, is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion or questions? All those in favor?
Aye.
I'd like to announce that the town hall will be closing at 4 o'clock on July 3rd. And we need to set the July meeting schedule.
I believe we have a meeting
10th and
scheduled for the
24th?
10th.
10th and
That
24th,
worked for
fine?
me, 10th and 24th.
Okay. Old business. Act to appoint Lisa Green to the position of Chief Procurement Officer. Is this something that was tabled
It
at
was
the last
tabled
meeting?
last meeting.
No.
There was some discussion about what the role of the chief procurement officer is and who can hold it.
Yeah, I had two concerns. One was, A, who should be the chief procurement officer? And B, as you saw, they're working on some policies for procurement that will sort of set a level playing ground for everybody. And I'd like to see, personally, I'd like to see those finished and in effect, and then go on to decide the issue of who's the chief procurement officer. And
Okay. Correct me if I'm wrong, has Lisa been acting as the Chief Procurement Officer?
no.
She hasn't been
She
acting
has
as...
been handling procurement.
She's been handling procurement, but
Yes.
without the title of
Yes.
Chief Procurement Officer. The prior assistant town administrator was the Chief Procurement Officer, is that
Yes.
correct?
We did not designate him
Greg
as
was-
a chief procurement officer. We definitely did not designate him as chief procurement officer. There's two designations. There's,
Yeah, that's what I had.
you can designate him as the chief procurement officer.
Yeah,
And he can delegate his authority. If whoever, he or she can delegate as much of the authority as they want to that person, which is what was done with Greg. The recommendation from the Inspector General, if there's nothing in your charter, then it's up to the selectmen to decide. My concern with it is the person who ends up as the chief procurement officer is where the buck should stop. And it should be us, or our representative. He can delegate all of that authority to Lisa, who I think is exceptionally capable of dealing with what she has to deal with as a procurement officer. But I think that the top person at the top of the food chain has to be the town administrator. And for a lot of reasons. And I've been in the Attorney General's office on issues, I've been in court, and I've been in the Inspector General's office on issues. And it should be, and as a representative of the town, it should be the person that we hired to represent us. And Lisa can handle most of it, or 90% of it, but that chief procurement officer designation goes with the position. It doesn't go with the person, but it goes with the position. So if we make that position of the assistant town manager, chief procurement officer,
Right.
that's who it is until we change that designation, whether it's Lisa or the next person, or Frank decides he's leaving tomorrow, and
Yeah.
Lisa moves up tomorrow, then you don't even have a chief procurement officer until we redesignate it.
Okay.
So
So-
it's very specific that it's a position that we're
I
putting.
hear you. We're positive that Greg was never designated chief procurement
I
officer.
believe the board voted to appoint Greg CPO.
Are there any minutes to show
That
that?
was my memory, that we did.
Lori? Yes?
Yeah,
Well-
we did.
Then, if that was the case, then there would be no point in this exercise, because then by default,
I think that's what I'm getting at.
she is.
She is
But
already.
I will, or we should check with the Inspector General's office, because I wouldn't have agreed to that if I
All
knew
right.
that that's what we were doing.
I will check.
So it actually should go to, you're saying it should go to the position, not the person.
The position of Chief Procurement Officer
Right.
is typically spelled out in a charter, and we don't have that. In the charter, it would to say it was the town manager, or it would say it was the town administrator. That's the recommendation from the Inspector General's office, and that's typically how it's done. In this particular case, we don't have that. And so it's up to us as a board. Now, you know, I'm 1 out of 5, so
But
I'm
if-
just telling you the way I feel and why I feel it should be done that way.
I follow you totally. When Laurie tells me that that she's seen minutes in which we voted Greg to be the chief procurement
Well,
officer.
We have 2 different forms that we could have used. That's the
And that's-
question, is which form we used. I was
Yeah.
under the impression we used the chief procurement officer's delegation of procurement powers, which is the one that was used, that I filled out for me in my position. So the director of municipal services for my town, me,
You were
got all the power.
delegated those duties, but you weren't the chief
right,
procurement
the
officer.
chief procurement officer by charter
Is the guy who delegated,
is the town manager.
but we don't have that.
We don't have a charter.
So we need to know what it meant when, Laurie, do you remember when that happened?
2013. And it's a
2013?
very simple phone
We
call
need-
to the IG's.
Yeah, we need to find out
I'll follow up on
what
it.
did that vote in 2013 mean when we
I'll follow up.
designated Greg to be that, because there's no sense to appoint Lisa as the chief procurement officer.
She might already be.
is one. That's
It might already be, right?
I mean, it's, you know, from what Scott is saying, if we're not following the recommended process, then we should look at that. And I will make that call.
Okay, and you can report to us. We'll keep this on the agenda for the next meeting. And maybe one of these days, we'll have a chief procurement officer
We have a procurement
that
officer,
everyone recognizes.
and that's all we need.
Right.
Does a great job. So it's tabled, right?
Yeah, we're going to come back to it again. Call for a sergeant's list.
We tabled this from the last meeting because there were some concerns. I know that Scott had some concerns about making an appointment during this civil service process we're going through.
Okay, we need to be careful in the discussion, because if we are discussing anyone and it's clear to people in the audience or who may have seen this meeting who we're talking about, we can't be talking about it unless,
We're discussing a vacancy
yeah,
and a potential second vacancy.
okay. We have a vacancy now, and we're discussing a potential second vacancy.
Yes,
All right.
we have a vacancy due to a retirement, a sergeant that was never replaced, and we have a second
Right.
vacancy
Okay,
that's being questioned. The,
And that is who we're calling to replace. That's how this came up.
what, pardon?
That's how this originally came up.
I just thought we should wait until we're further along in the process.
Yeah,
There's no sense rushing into this.
calling for a sergeant.
Right.
I guess the question is, do we need a sergeant right now? If we do, we need to look at this. If we don't, or we could wait on it, then we table it until the end results. It's that simple.
Can ask the guys in the back.
Right?
Chief,
It's that simple.
you need a sergeant, chief?
I don't know, maybe. Guess it depends.
We'll add that to the
Well,
survey
it
list.
depends on
How
what.
many sergeants we should
Depends
have?
on what the board does, I guess. I mean, you have the power to, I don't know. Maybe I'll go backwards. We currently do not have a sergeant for the split shift. 2 4 to 12s, 2 midnight to 8s, double in the middle. Right now, it's a temporary patrolman's position. It has been posted as that.
Which is the one.
That's the one.
And if that situation changes, we would then have one more than we currently.
You have potentially 2. You have 1, you have potentially 2, I guess is the answer.
I say we wait then. I agree with you.
So, I mean, the department's running fine. If you want to wait, it's okay with me. I'm not, I mean, it's ultimately up to you, but I don't have a,
Yeah, it's up to us, but it's based upon your recommendation, chief. That's,
well, I don't have an issue with not doing it right now.
All right,
If the
all
board's
right.
more comfortable in waiting, I don't
Okay.
think that it's something that we have to do immediately,
okay.
for sure.
Okay, that's good enough for me.
Yeah.
So we'll hold on to this one as tightly as we hold on to the chief procurement officer thing. Discuss recruitment of a town accountant. Frank?
As you know, town accountant retired, and we are currently utilizing the services of a temporary accountant. He is filling in by working 1 day a week. And the question I have in deciding how to fill this vacancy is what we need. So conducted a survey.
I'm guessing you need more than 1 day a week.
Well, maybe. What's interesting is when I did the salary survey through the benchmark program, the indications on that survey were very different from what I got back by going to first communities of similar size based on population and/or budget, and then proximity. So I'm surprised that there are a number of communities that are not operating with a full-time accountant. I've asked the gentleman who's currently serving in this position what his assessment was as to whether, based on what he's seen, is this something that requires a full-time position, or is it something that can be accommodated on a part-time basis? And his sense is, transactionally, there's enough work to keep an accountant busy, but it may not be necessary to have someone there full-time. I would like to begin this process, and what I'd like to do is have one or two selectmen work with me in coming up with a plan to better define and fill the position.
Do we have any volunteers? Anyone want to work with Frank on this? Brian will? Anyone else?
I'll do it.
Great.
Okay, Brian and Randy, okay. Great.
I gotta say, with a $30-something million budget, I would think we'd want somebody full-time. That's a lot. You could probably,
Pembroke with 63 million is working with a part-time and has been for a couple of years.
how's it working out for them though? I mean, you could probably use somebody a little more with budget analysis, or, I
Right.
mean, if you get somebody who's a little more savvy, bring in some new software.
Next item on the agenda is the travel and expense policy. We have a copy of this. So we actually have a policy, and this is a recommended change to the policy?
Yes. So the areas that were highlighted are what I suggest be added to the policy, and this was developed, Scott shared Duxbury's policy, and I went online to search parameters and expenditure authorizations, and it seems to me that a policy should provide not only general but specific guidelines as to what type of expenses and what range of expenses should be supported.
Is this similar to Duxbury's?
Yeah, it is similar. It's actually, the Duxbury one is,
It's a little
how old do you think that is?
more vague than,
Yeah, it was fairly vague, and,
This is pretty specific.
yeah, this one is a lot
the
more
the biggest difference, or the biggest
I like the fact.
change in this draft would be identifying reasonable limits.
Mhm.
She doesn't have an extra copy.
I have one, you know, I might have one here.
Well, obviously, we'd have to set a definitive meal per diem before we adopted this.
Basically, the per diems are defined, the GAO provides guidelines based on geographic areas and types of expenditures. The sample I put there, did I use,
See, per diem rates,
I used
Lodging.
the Massachusetts
that's column
chart.
as meals, okay. I see that.
It provides general guidelines for meals and for hotels. Our policy specifically defines certain things that cannot be expensed. And it's all based on market conditions. They're updated periodically, and they're available online. And they are for every reasonable geographic area. So if you're going to Florida or South Carolina or Chicago or Boston, you'd be able to
Link.
pull up that list by simply using the link and putting in the state.
Dr. Kowalski, if I
Yes.
just could.
Sure.
Is somebody going to talk to the I know this is a policy that you're working on, but where it's going to affect whatever department head it's going to affect, is there going to be a conversation had, or is this just something that gets voted in and live with it? I'm just asking.
Well, typically, a policy like this would be adopted and distributed. And if there's feedback, I don't know that we're going to have any objections to this policy. I can't see any. But if somebody had an objection, we would bring it back and discuss it before the board.
I don't know if there'd be an objection, but like we sit down and talk, I'm just comparing it to like we sit down and talk with the union. I don't know why there wouldn't be a conversation with the people that are going to be affected. I mean, ultimately, the board can say, well, that's nice that you object, but we're still putting it in, but at least we had a conversation. And it was raised instead of putting it in first and then saying, oh, take a look at it, and then hearing maybe an objection that you may say, oh, well, maybe we could change that. I don't know what it says, but it just, I just think,
You haven't seen it.
no.
Frank, why don't we
And distribute it.
distribute a copy of
Bring it back on
this proposal?
Thank you.
And ask for reactions to it by our next meeting.
Sure.
We'll consider this sort of like a first reading of this.
Yeah.
And it'll give us a chance to think some more about it, too. And then what we would hope to do is at our next meeting, July 10th, is have gathered some responses to this and decide what we want to do with it.
Okay.
Does that make sense to the rest of you?
You know, I think by having this policy, what we're accomplishing is the fact that here we are, we talk about being in a budget crisis, and we're going to do a survey and find out from the taxpayers what's most important to them. So we need to put in some policies where we do control our spending. It's that simple. And, you know, it's whether or not you have, you know, you go out to dinner and you have a $90 steak, or you have a $30 steak. You know what I mean? You want a $90 steak, we only can pay for the 30, and the other 60's on you.
Fine, there are some guidelines in here.
Right.
We're going to share it with the department heads.
Right, and I think that's what we're looking at.
And then we'll come back and talk about it in 2
Yeah,
weeks.
there's nothing in here that should be onerous for anyone,
Right.
but
Yeah,
I'll
I mean, it's
circulate it to all the department heads. And
Okay.
I'll invite
pretty reasonable, I think, the pricing.
And if
Well-
you look at this compared to other municipalities that have their policies posted online, it is pretty standard across
It is, okay. Okay.
other municipalities.
So we'll expect it to run very smoothly in 2 weeks. That's good, that's good.
And if it doesn't.
I like that, I like that.
vote and-
All right. Yes, sure. Be my guest.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Are there other policies that the board is going to consider as well? Free cash policy or things like the capital improvement plan? Are these things in the works, like coming up in the next couple of meetings, or is that, this is all?
Yeah, you're going to see policies coming with some regularity, where we're updating. We had a personnel policies book that was pretty much finished a while ago,
Until we started adding.
until we started adding things to it. And so we're giving it a final polish now. And then that whole thing will become published, yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
The Collins report also, is that something that will be public soon, or is that kind of pushed
Well,
off? Or is it
the
any-
verbal report is on the web. The structure of the salaries is something we're going to have to talk about.
Yeah, the selectmen have received copies of that. We haven't talked about it as a group yet, though. However, there are a number of things that we're going to be talking about with some regularity over the next number of meetings. The Collins report is going to be mentioned at every meeting.
Sure.
Whether or not we're ready to talk about it yet, I don't know. I'm not ready to talk about it yet. But it's going to be on our agenda.
Okay.
Collins report, response to the
Do you
Collins.
have like a schedule about when these things are going to be
Not
discussed?
yet,
and how-
no, we don't. No, I had a conversation with some selectmen a couple of weeks ago about changing in some ways the nature of these meetings, and that'll become clear as we, I sound like my favorite president, that'll become clear as we roll it out. For example, personnel policies, the Personnel Policies Handbook, we're going to have that as a regular item on the agenda, and we're either going to deal with something related to it or not each week, but it's going to be there for everybody to be paying attention to. The community assessment, obviously, is going to be something that's going to be on our agenda over the next series of months until we get it done. Performance evaluations of the people that we supervise. It's going to be an agenda item that we're going to be discussing.
Well, I guess, like she mentioned, doing some reverse engineering. If you know that the town meeting is going to be in May, and you know that you want to roll this stuff out to the public so that they have a certain amount of time to, review all this stuff before
Yeah,
any sort of...
I don't see, and I could be totally wrong about this, I don't see the town meeting being the high mass of the year in which everything has to be done by that time. I think there's a manner of business that we need to adopt as a group of selectmen that's going to be consistent. And when the town meeting comes, the town meeting comes. But I think one of the reasons why our budget process is the way it is that the town meeting, preparing for a town meeting was the be-all and end-all of what the Finance Committee was doing. And so they would ask the department heads to come in, and they'd say, I'd like to have this year. And then you guys would discuss it, and then would have a vote at town meeting. And you're someone that's brought up an objection to that process.
Sure.
That it shouldn't be just like that. It should be folded into something else, long-range thinking and short-term goals. I think that the Board of Selectmen has to act the same way. It can't make getting ready for town meeting our goal.
Sure.
It's
So that
one
makes
of
sense. I just
it's
didn't
one
know
of the
if
objectives. One of the objectives, but not the goal.
I didn't know if the big override coming was, this was the flip side of the coin that was going to kind of be rolled out together, but you're saying that's not necessarily going to be the case.
No, it might, but I think we are having discussions of things like the Collins Report, personnel policies, performance evaluations, community assessment,
Capital improvement.
budget scenarios. All of that will keep all of these things in people's minds. So when they do come to the town meeting, they'll be more informed than they were before. But I don't see us setting down a path where we are going to get a certain amount of things done by town meeting. If it's done by town meeting, it's done by town meeting. If it isn't, it's something that we keep rolling over. Does that make any sense?
Different than...
Am I making sense to you?
To Sean's point, we are eventually going to have to get into some budget conversations and what we're going to do about that budget.
Yeah.
Sooner than later. And obviously, we're now getting into July.
I'd like to see deadlines on that too, is like when that is gonna kick off and when we're going. Sure.
Right.
I mean, that's a valid question.
Yeah, we're getting into the first month of the year, you're right.
It's already been a couple months since town meeting. Yeah, really.
Since the town meeting.
No,
Since the
that's-
last town.
Everybody needs a breath.
It's been a month and a half.
Yeah.
We haven't
counting?
closed the books yet, but yeah.
But yeah, we definitely, I mean, we do want to get a schedule. We are running into a tough year. And it's got to get rolled out.
And that was made clear in the meeting.
Right, I know we talked about having department heads
Right.
submit their budgets in September, but I don't think we can wait on our plan until then. And I know it's not on the agenda, but I would like to see a budget discussion on the agenda for the July 10th meeting, and at least maybe we can kick around some ideas of,
Give me an example. No, fine. I think that was my intent anyway when I was talking, that we're going to keep it. You know,
I think the last meeting, we
So
actually
what's
had
going to,
budget discussion on the agenda,
yeah,
and it was my idea that that was going to be a continuous item.
yeah, yes, it is. And what would you like to accomplish on July 10th? And how do you see that? What's this discussion that we're going to have on the budget, about the budget on July 10th?
One thing for me, I mean, I don't want to
I'm
speak...
talking to him right now.
One of the things I want to definitely discuss is rebonding the police station. You and I have had.
Okay,
a
that's
discussion.
one discussion I think that we need to have this year. You're right.
And that's something that I think we need to discuss very early, because it's going to be quite a process.
Mhm.
But also, I mean, we also want to discuss, if we're going to have this committee, let's get a charge for the committee and put a committee together if we're going to look at something. And, you know, that's something that we probably should get on the agenda and do sooner than later, because we're going to want to reach out to who else we want on this committee, if it's going to be one at large. And this is separate of the,
So why don't we have that as a July 10th agenda item, the establishment of a
working group.
working group,
Let's not call it a committee.
yeah, a working group.
Just, if I could just finish my thought.
Yeah,
that-
I'm sorry, John, go ahead.
I would just say, as a matter of priority, I'm not so concerned with how a chief is spending his money on a, travel expense. I mean, of course, that has to be dealt with, but
All
the
right.
capital improvement plan, as opposed, seems to be like a sense of
When-
urgency around it.
When did Chief's travel come up?
I thought, maybe I misunderstood the last policy exchange, the travel expense.
It's for everyone. It's
For
everyone.
There's an
everybody.
ongoing process here
Yeah.
where we're trying to establish a whole list of policies.
Yeah, which-
So whether it's important to you or not, this is something that we've already started.
I'm not saying it's
So
unimportant.
there's
I would
going
just
to be
say,
policies that are coming that it's not part of the overall crisis that's in front of us, it's just part of our plan to get policies in place and to professionalize or
you seem like you're on the ball, and I feel like I like hearing you talk about policy, and I'd like just to hear that more. So, thank you.
You doing all right? Okay, so that was my around the board bit.
we weren't doing that anymore.
Well, we haven't decided not, I don't want to do that anymore, but that was, we're still in this year. So this might be the last time you have a chance to do it.
Oh, you got nothing.
You have nothing? Okay. Do you have anything, Randy?
I do.
Still got agenda items.
Are you comfortable with discussing the bond issue at the same time as we're discussing setting up a committee that's going to be dealing with things like the bond issue? Is it sort of like putting the discussion before the
Honestly,
discussers?
To me, that's a decision we have to make. I don't want to see it go to a committee for the summer and they kick it around and there's 5 guys right here that are going to make that decision ultimately.
I can be
sending it
prepared to provide initial information on July 10th.
Okay, so why don't we, that'll be on the agenda then. And we'll also talk about setting up the WG. Yeah, the working group. Okay, so you guys are done.
Oh, no, I do.
You have something else?
I do have one thing real quick. I'd like
That
to,
item's on the agenda.
this is from Chief Greno. Unfortunately, couldn't make it this evening. But he wanted me to thank the Long family from Apollo Road. They donated 300 action wipes for firefighters. What that does, a serious concern right now for firefighters is job-related cancers. This family went above and beyond, purchased these of their own accord, and donated them to our firefighters. So I did want to thank them and make sure that they got
Okay,
recognized.
great. The name of the family again?
That was the Long family.
Long family on Apollo Road.
On Apollo Road, yeah.
You got anything, Dan?
Yes, I do. And this is for the board. At our last South Shore VOTEC meeting, we had ourselves an abundance in our E&D account of $85,040. So we voted to give back, according to the pupil count, monies back to the town, and Whitman will be receiving $18,760.84. That'll be taken off our last assessment.
We already have the check.
Huh? You already
We
got it?
already have the check.
Right. So when we talk about around the board, I think I suggested to our chairman that instead of doing around the board, maybe we should say that anybody who has anything to discuss on their, like I'm on the JTC, if anything interesting on my last meeting or anything like that came up, I would discuss it, just like South Shore VOTEC, letting the board know that we'll be receiving money. So it might be a different way of doing around the board, not making it personal, but strictly business.
Good idea.
We don't like putting you on the hot seat, Scott.
I don't mind being on it.
Yeah, actually, while go ahead, Brian. Why don't you do your last around the board?
Well, I think around the board is important, because sometimes you can add things that people don't know about. And one thing that I say every year is 4th of July holiday's coming up. And a lot of people, even though they're illegal, a lot of people do fireworks. And they are dangerous, and you have to be careful with them. But you have to remember 2 things. There are veterans in your neighborhood that you might not know about, that might have some traumatic issues from the sounds of the fireworks. Take your neighbors into consideration when you're shooting these things off. And there are plenty of families who have pets that get traumatized by this. So I think that you should think twice before you're shooting these things off at 10 o'clock at night in your neighborhood.
And they're illegal.
What's that?
And they're illegal. So we don't
So
condone it.
it's just something that I
Just caught on fire.
I try to say it every year, because until you see it happen, it's a sad situation. So be careful.
Okay. Be careful out there.
Be careful.
Thank you, Brian. Geez, Brian, I was ready to drop the around the board thing like a hot potato.
Well, I think.
But you actually gave me a reason why it works. It works sometimes.
And it-
But here's my thought. It's always seemed to me to be kind of awkward.
Yeah,
And the logic is this. This is a public meeting.
right.
People have the right to know, or they have the right to have a reasonable expectation of what's going to be talked about at a public meeting.
Right.
At the end of our meeting, when we say, let's go around the board, that has given people the opportunity to bring up stuff that they didn't have time to get onto the agenda.
Right.
Or whatever. And to me, that's not right.
Yep.
I think we need to know 3 days in advance,
Yeah.
more than roughly what we want to talk about
Right.
each night. So I thought that there could be a change. Frank, we always start off around the board with Frank, and that's the opportunity for the town administrator to drop whatever he wants to drop on us at the end of a meeting. Sometimes it's stuff that he probably should have let us know a couple of days in advance. We want to encourage him not to do that. And one of the ways we encourage him not to do that is not have her on the board. And then the rest of us, like I had my finger in my mouth and I said, I don't know, I've got nothing to say today. These guys, more often than not, pass, right?
Hey.
Don't say it.
You talk, and you'll talk about, what happens at South Shore or the Old Colony. That could be a part of the agenda, though.
Yeah.
Report about the Old Colony, report about South Shore Votech, about liaison reports from people. If there's
Yeah.
something that has been going on in the groups that you liaison with
Right.
that is important, and that, if it's important enough, should be on the agenda a couple of days in advance. So I'd like to move towards that kind of a psychology. But you just threw me for a loop, because that was a nice speech, and I was witness to
Yeah, it happened.
an accident a few years ago where unfortunately, some relatives of mine were setting off fireworks on a beach down the Cape, and one of my other relatives, who didn't know what was going on, almost had his head taken off by a thing that went sideways. So I've seen it,
Yeah,
There are morons everywhere.
right.
You know.
Just click on YouTube.
So, I'd like to see, for example, Frank give a town administrator's report at every meeting. Okay, yeah. Sure. Something on the agenda. And maybe we'll have another agenda item like, and Laurie's taking this down in case I forget it, because, my mind is gone. Something like liaison reports. And if somebody has something that they think that we ought to hear about, let her know. I want to get some more formality
Sure.
to our agenda. And
Maybe the fire chief report, police chief report?
well, we started with that, but we kind of lost track of that, and it happens only every once in a while. I think perhaps this summer, talking about the bond issue, I would think that the public safety people, the fire chief and the police chief, would be on board this summer to talk a little bit about their budget and what we can do facing the crisis that we might be facing in their departments. They're important departments for us. DPW has to take care of themselves. The schools take care of themselves, and that is actually one of the real clickers in this. And that they run a parallel path. And somehow we have to find a way to bridge that parallel path so that we can do some planning too. But I think, Chief, at some point in the summer, we'll have to talk seriously about things, budget-wise. And you can let Tim Greno know too that we need to do that with his department too. And that will be becoming part of the regular process on our agenda. That's my spiel for today. And it might take a while for us to get used to doing it, but I want to roll it out as we can. We need to go into executive session in accordance with Mass General Law 30A, Section 21A, to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel, or to conduct collective bargaining sessions or contract negotiations with non-union personnel, and Exception 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body. Is there a motion?
Motion.
Second, yes.
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
And we'll be coming in back in open session only to adjourn.
Let me grab those.